Welcome everyone to the May 23rd meeting of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. I'm President Becky Greenwald and we're so glad to see you here today. So for our guests that are here, I like to start off our meetings with a little Rotary factoid. And I just want to talk about how we know that we're proud to be the first Rotary Club in Iowa, and we're actually club number 27 out of what's now over 35,000 clubs internationally. And this week, Rotarians from across the globe are traveling to Singapore because the Sharing Hope with the World Rotary International Convention starts in Singapore this Saturday and runs through Wednesday. So just be thinking about that, and I just want to remind you that when you're traveling near or far, whether it's to the outskirts of Des Moines or somewhere around the globe, if you'd like to visit another Rotary Club, the next time you take a trip, just download the app. There's an app for that. Rotary Club makes it easy to find one of these 35,000 clubs, and you can search by country, by town, by days of the week that they meet, all sorts of different things. So if you're interested, there's an app for it. Check it out. And so now I would like to ask Randy to come up and give us a moment of inspiration, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will.
Thank you, President Becky. I had the occasion to overhear a conversation recently, and it was between a gentleman my vintage, maybe a little older, and maybe somebody about half his age. And it was close enough proximity they were that the younger said to the older, how are you? Those general things. And the elderly gentleman said, well, I'm good. My wife and I just got back from an RV trip to visit our daughter. And instead of just letting that go, the younger guy says, well, how was it? And he said, well, we always enjoy seeing her, but this trip was kind of not so good, because on the same day she found out that she was going to need to face a serious health issue, and she lost her job. So doing what dads do, he filled her gas tank and bought her a gas card, paid a couple bills, and told her, hey, something comes up, don't worry about it, you gotta let me know. And they came home. And through the conversation, the younger guy said, yeah, that's what dads do, and affirmed to him that he was indeed a good dad. And so when it come time for them to part, I did see this. He started to walk away, and the old guy said, hey. He turned around and he said, thanks for listening. And so it got me thinking about a couple things, which is usually dangerous. The connection between the heart and the brain, and I know there is one, but also the connection between listening and hearing. When we listen, we pay attention in order to hear. And when we hear, we gain knowledge. And that's my hope for myself, and I hope for you, that I try to listen more. Didn't cost the younger man any more than 2 minutes of his time, and they both walked away better for it. Now the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the five-way test.
Is it true? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And is it fun?
Meet and greet.
Hi, how are you?
Mr. Craig, how are you, sir?
Thank you, sir.
Jordan?
Great job, Randy. Matthew, how are you?
I've been in the same program. Yep, same program. I taught
Well, always good to see people renewing their acquaintances every week. And now it's time for us to introduce our guests today. We have three guests. First, Peg and Paul Schilling. If you would, our guests would stand up and stay standing. We will introduce everyone and acknowledge you at the end. Peg and Paul are the guests and family of Carl Schilling. Peg is Paul's wife, and Paul is the son. So nice to have you here. And we have Matt Paul, who's the guest of our speaker. So please raise, and let's welcome all three of our guests. And it's tumbler time. So please consider donating $5 to the cup in the middle of the table. If you don't already have a green dollar sign on your name badge, this is how we fund our Rotary Club of Des Moines Foundation, one of the ways that we do that. And everybody's always welcome to contribute, and we thank you for your continued support. Want to wish a happy birthday to Brandon Bennett. Brandon's not here today, but you might want to reach out and wish him a happy birthday. And just in honor of Memorial Day and our program and our military tradition that is in many of our families, I just would like to take a moment to acknowledge and honor the brave men and women who have served and continue to serve our country. The sacrifices and dedication that they make ensure the freedoms that we hold so dear. And we really do extend our sincere and deepest appreciation to these heroes and their families, because without their support and their resilience, it'd be difficult for them to have a good service experience. So, thank you. We just want to be sure that we remember those who have given their lives in the line of duty and express our heartfelt thanks to all of our veterans and our active duty service members and their families for their unwavering commitment to our nation. So just kind of going around the room here, if we've got some veterans who have served during Korean War, would you stand as I reel off some of these opportunities, occasions of war? Cold War, Vietnam, the Gulf War. We've got war in Afghanistan, thank you. The Iraq War, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Operation Inherent Resolve, which is ongoing at this time. And so with all our veterans, let's give them all a round of applause. And if you have family members that are currently serving or have served, please know how much we appreciate that support of all of our service members, veterans, and their families. So thank you very much. And now I would like to invite Carl Schilling to come up and introduce our guest speaker. Carl.
There's a tension when introducing guests as we have today between doing the guests justice and not taking time away from the people we actually want to hear. I've chosen to be brief and not to do justice to them because I probably couldn't do them justice anyway. But I'll start with Christy Vilsack, who was a teacher for 25 years, and that alone we could honor. Her experience has led her to be an advocate for libraries and an education advisor for colleges and universities. She has been a beloved Iowa First Lady. She claims to be retired. Right. She remains half of a power couple that, like Energizer bunnies, serve and serve. Captain Douglas McCrae is a graduate of Iowa State University and other institutions we don't care about. His career in the Navy lasted from 1977 to his retirement in 2007. His record is impressive as he rose in the ranks, but I think most important, to me at least, he was a ship captain of the USS John Hall, a guided missile frigate. My father and I were petty officers. He was a fleet sailor, I was a Seabee. And what we both learned was one does not make captain of a ship or battalion with the safety and lives of many in your hands and responsibility to lead in defending our nation and Constitution unless you have the right stuff. Captain McCrae commanded a ship, was later commanding officer of the Fleet Combat Training Center Atlantic, and lastly returned to be commanding officer of the NROTC unit and professor of naval science, again at Iowa State University. He's been awarded the Legion of Merit 3 times, Defense Meritorious Service Medal twice, Navy Marine Achievement Medal, and a bunch of campaign awards. Clearly, he has the right stuff. He's currently program manager for a recycling firm, Central Iowa Organics, and life member of the American Legion. He's been married to Catherine McCrae of Washington, Iowa for 45 years and has 2 children, James, a graphic designer, and Erica, married to, wait for it, a submarine commander. And they have 3 sons. Let's now hear what they have to say about the most advanced submarine to hit the water, the USS Iowa.
You want to put it up there, Ron. Thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here, and I want to introduce my good friend and family member, Matt Paul, who is one of the co-founders of Cornerstone, a public affairs business here in Des Moines, and he has been a part of our lives ever since he came to work for the governor after he left Mayor Clancy's office in Cedar Rapids, his hometown, and has been with us all these years here in the governor's office and then at USTA, where he ran the communications system, and now is back in Des Moines and all over the country. But he is also, because one of his clients is General Dynamics, which built our submarine, has offered to help and volunteer as kind of part of the commission and help me navigate the waters of submarines and the Navy. When I was growing up in a family with a naval aviator, he used to say, my dad used to say, there's the right way, the wrong way, and the Navy way. And he also taught me at a very early age to say the Navy gets the gravy and the Army gets the beans. So he was indoctrinating me very early, but he was also a Rotarian. And so when I was a senior in high school, women were not allowed at that time to be Rotarians, not even as I was a young woman in my professional career in Mount Pleasant. But the Rotarians sent me to South America as a foreign exchange student with AFS, and then we had our first Rotary exchange student my senior year in high school, who's been a lifelong friend. And I've continued my connection with Rotary as First Lady because you funded my literacy project, and I've traveled to Rotary clubs throughout the state. But when I moved back to Iowa from Washington, I joined the Ames Rotary. So I finally got to be a Rotarian for the time that I lived in Ames, and I'm happy to be here today. And thank you, Susan, for inviting me. So you can imagine, I grew up, my dad was in my kitchen every Saturday and Sunday morning, and often was telling stories. And one of the stories I heard over and over again was about when he was stationed in Norfolk as a naval aviator, and one day realized that the battleship USS Iowa had come into the harbor and was there for 2 weeks. And he and his squadron couldn't figure out, they would position themselves to take off. He flew PBYs and PBMs and take off every day and would come right up to the USS Iowa. They couldn't figure out what it was doing there. And on November 27th, 1943, a few weeks later, a Commodore came into the room in the morning as they were getting ready for their flights that day, and he said, the USS Iowa with the President of the United States aboard will be leaving X-ray sugar at 0600, and you're to keep with her until nightfall. And it wasn't until later that he realized that President Roosevelt was on his way to Tehran to meet with Churchill and Stalin. So you can imagine how excited I was when in 2015 I got a call from the Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus, who was governor of Mississippi when Tom was governor of Iowa, and knew that I was the child of a naval aviator, and knew that Tom's great uncle Charlie had won the Medal of Honor and has a boat named after him because he saved his tender ship at Pearl Harbor. So he knew we were both part of naval families. And he said, when a ship is decommissioned, as the USS Iowa has been, because it's now a museum, he said, as Secretary of the Navy, I get to name all of the naval vessels, and I get to choose the sponsors. I didn't know there was such a thing as a sponsor, and he said, you know, this is the person who gets to crash the champagne bottle on the boat when it gets to christen the boat. And he said, and I'm calling to ask you if you would be the sponsor of the newest fast attack submarine, the newest boat named for Iowa, the USS Iowa. He said, I know this is going to make your husband very unhappy, and he said, I'm happy to do it because he'll think he should be the sponsor of the USS Iowa, but it's a Navy tradition that only women be sponsors. And he explained the job to me and said that if you agree to be the sponsor of the USS Iowa, then you will be responsible for the crew, the officers, and their families for the rest of your life. And so I agreed, and I'm honored to be here today. It's taken us a long time to get this boat, and I have to tell you that not only did I agree, but in doing so, it meant that my family will assume the responsibilities for this boat as long as it's commissioned for their lives. So that means, and it's not the boys in my family, it is Caroline, who's 10, came out with me, and maybe you'll see a picture of her later standing beside me when I christen the boat, because she will become the sponsor of the USS Iowa after I die. And so she's made that agreement, she's agreed to do it, and so she'll be with me as she learns how to take care of this crew and their families for the rest of her life as well, maybe with a little help from her brothers, because as I said at the christening, the world is changing, and so I hope that my whole family will be involved. Anyway, so I hope that you all get a chance to take a look at the submarine. You should have watched me as I was trying to get on an airplane in Providence, Rhode Island. I had this and I was putting it through security, and of course it's a tube, a long black tube that they were looking at through and so I was of course stopped, and they wanted me to take it out of the box and show them what it was, and they were all delighted because all the people in the airport in Providence, Rhode Island are connected with Groton, Connecticut, and the naval systems that are surrounding it, and many of them had stories to tell me after they saw that it was a submarine. But imagine our submarine is 3 stories high, and if you put it on a football field, it would extend past the goalposts. And I'm going to leave it to Captain McCrae to give you some of the details of the boat and answer your naval questions. But I want to talk just a little bit about the experience of being a part of this whole operation. So the first thing as a sponsor I was able to do in Groton was to go to the keeling ceremony. So my initials are welded into the keel of the USS Iowa. And I was there the day that the welder, who you'll see right there, welded them in front of us. It was a big audience. The Navy is big on ceremony, right? So it was a big ceremony. The keel was laid, and then it took, because of the pandemic, it took a long time to get the submarine finished, and so that we could christen it last year. But I was there for the keel laying ceremony. Tom was able to come with me, which was great, and he's been a great spouse of a ship sponsor, even though he thought he should be the sponsor of the USS Iowa. I do also want to remind you, I want to say that one of the reasons that Secretary Mabus asked me to do this was because Iola Wallace was a sponsor of the USS Iowa battleship, and she was the spouse of Henry Wallace, who was Vice President and the Secretary of Agriculture. So it's a kind of a part of a tradition as the Navy does these kinds of things. And when I am with Dr. Biden, she is the sponsor of the USS Delaware. Laura Bush is a sponsor. So if you looked at the list of sponsors, oftentimes family members of admirals are involved. Ray Mabus has asked his daughter to be a sponsor, and she's going to be sponsoring one of the boats that's coming up next. For me, one of the most exciting parts of this was the fact that the USS Iowa is probably the most sophisticated submarine in the world right now, but it also was the first submarine that was built, literally built to accommodate women. So, and you can correct me, Doug, if I'm wrong, but at least when we christened the boat, there were 6 enlisted and women officers on the boat and the boat was made to accommodate them aboard. And they are, I hope you get a chance to meet some of them. One of the things that I think is pretty unique to the USS Iowa, and I know that the other states who are commissioning boats and have boats named after them do a great job, but I think from the very beginning, we've tried to get as many of the crew members as possible to Iowa. And really one of the first things they did was to come out to help clean up after the derecho. So that's the day I learned how to use a chainsaw. My family would not teach me how to use a chainsaw, but the chief of boat for the USS Iowa in Marshalltown and here in Des Moines taught me how to use the chainsaw as we were cleaning up the debris after that incident. But different members have been here for RAGBRAI, have ridden RAGBRAI. They've been here for the state fair for several years. They've been here for the Iowa State game. They've been here, they've been to many schools in the state. They do STEM projects with kids in the schools. And I think for me, one of the best parts of this experience is the whole idea that whether they're retired submariners in Iowa, so we have them along with us. There are retired Navy, they may not have been submariners, but lots of people who've been involved in the Navy, men and women have been involved. And we've been involved with kids in school. We've invited people who built the boat, have been with us. We've been with people who are politicians who have paid for the boat and have been part of the christening and will be part of the commissioning. So it's really been a great experience kind of across the board to have all these people be part of something that is really a tradition and part of our heritage in Iowa. So we've been through the keel laying that you see here was the day that we christened the boat. It was an interesting experience to christen the boat, but it was also fun because before everybody came in, and you can see how many people were there, before that happened, there were 2 Iowans who were part of the crew. And we had gathered water from all of the waters of Iowa, from all the rivers and streams, and had commingled them, and the 2 of them and I climbed up on top of the boat and christened the boat before the ceremony with the waters of Iowa, which was really special. As I said, I christened the boat, we spoke, we had a great ceremony. You can see Caroline there, was waiting to get splattered with the champagne. So the christening is a ceremony that honors the people who built the boat. The boat is built in 2 different places. The submarine is built in 2 different places. It's much more efficient to build it in 2 places, so part of it was pulled up the river from, where was it, Newport News? Doug? The boat, the other half of the boat came up the river.
Comes up from Newport News.
And then is put together. So I've been a part of this because I was there for the keel laying. I often go to Groton for family picnics. I climb around the boat to see what's going on. It's a nuclear submarine, so as they put it together and as it became a whole, it's been fun to be a part of not only the naval people, but all of the working men and women who have made this are very, very proud of the work they did. So we've also had 2 changes of command. We had a captain, Captain Quentin James was our first captain. It was pointed out to me that I will continue with the boat until it's decommissioned, but captains will come and go. So this took so long to build that we've already been through 2 captains. We're about ready to have a change of command in June for our 2nd captain. And I don't think we know, do we know yet, or do you know who the next captain is?
Yes.
Oh, you do? Okay, you need to.
His name's Greg Coy.
Okay.
He's spent most of his time on attack submarines.
Okay, good. So we're going to install a 3rd captain, and that's also a very special ceremony. So it's been an honor to be a part of this, but I know that I probably talked too long, and so I want to get the guy up here who is the expert on the Navy and also has a lot of information about the submarine. So if you have questions, it's probably better to ask him than to ask me. So Doug, why don't you come up and take over for me?
Thank you, Christy. As Christy said, this has been a long-term process. Secretary Mavis named the boat in September of 2015. The keel was laid in August of 2019. The hull was put together and completed as one entire unit in October of 2021. We've been experiencing delays in getting the boat christened and commissioned due to COVID, due to supply chain issues, lots of different challenges that this boat has experienced that I don't think anybody else has at this point. But it's for Iowa, and we're Iowans, we'll persevere. In August of last year, August 16th, the boat started transitioning out of the building that it was being built in. It was placed in a graving dock, and part of the delay was there was an issue in the graving dock that delayed it 6 months. Here it is getting ready to be floated for the first time. And on August 17th, the boat actually was fully placed in the water, and outfitting and testing still continues. So that's where the boat is today. Christy made mention of the fact of how many women members of the crew. Right now there are 5 female officers and 20 or so enlisted females. The total goal is by ideally next April, the crew will be 40% female. That's a pretty lofty goal, but it's attainable. So I'm chairman of the commissioning committee, and what is the commissioning committee tasked to do? We're here to support the boat throughout the building and commissioning process. Our goal is to raise money and to bring people back for engagement opportunities, as Christy mentioned, for things like the State Fair and other events. We've been up to Irish Fest in Waterloo. We've made tours around the state. Some guys have come back for RAGBRAI and worked that. And our goal is to expose the crew to Iowans and to expose Iowans to the crew. This boat will be in service for 35 years representing the state of Iowa. That's a long time. These are motivated young men and women. The average age is 21. They're technically advanced, very, very smart. I gotta tell you, I spent a total of 34 years in the Navy, and I can't hold a candle to some of these men and women right now. They are that sharp, they are that motivated and energetic and dedicated to what they do. Other things that we do is we provide support to the crew while they re-run and their families. Now, this is primarily financial support for picnics. Christy's mentioned that she's been back to crew picnics for birthday events, which are in August, when we celebrate the keel laying. But we also help provide funding for babysitting services while the boat's being tested. Those testing hours, the crew could be working 12, 14-hour days, and many of their spouses work. So what do they do with their kids? We help provide funding to pay for child support. We are also in the process of trying to do some habitability upgrades for the boat. Now, this happens to be the wardroom table of the USS Indiana. We are working with a local company called Styx right now to come up with a similar design for the wardroom table of the Iowa, to make it more feel like home, make it more represent the state. Don't know what that design's gonna look like yet. That's still a work in progress. But we want to make sure that Iowa is represented throughout the lifetime of the boat. This is the Chief Petty Officer's Mess. The Chief Petty Officer's Mess, the table there is inscribed with the rating badges of the rating badges of the 3 Chief Petty Officer ranks on board. But in the back, those are pictures of the battleship Indiana. Heritage is a very important part of the Chief Petty Officer Creed and the Chief Petty Officer Mess. We're looking to try to come up with something that reflects not only the battleship, but the history of Iowa for that area as well. And then these are the cruise mess. And the cruise mess have several different tables. Again, the table designs are still being worked on. Those pictures that you see there actually cover storage cabinets. And if we don't do anything to make them pretty, they're just gonna be a little wood grain or stainless steel cabinets. So we're working to try to get designs to make those cabinets as well, and then get them installed to make life a little more habitable while the crew's gone. The submarine is designed to stay underwater for up to 90 days. And why that limit? That's the limit on food. That's the only reason they have to come to the surface. So this is their home. This is their recreation area. This is their education area. This is the recreation center of the boat, if you will. The goal, obviously, hopefully come late August, early September, as the boat get underway. And this is what she'll look like underway. You won't see 2/3 of it. The boat itself is 390 feet long by 43 feet wide. This places about 75,000 tons submerged. That means it places 75,000 tons of seawater. It's capable of speeds in excess of 25 knots. It has an operating depth of anywhere from the surface to 800 feet. And I can tell you, yes, it can go deeper than 800 feet, but that's the advertised depth that it will operate at. This is an attack submarine, so it carries torpedoes and cruise missiles. Its primary functions are anti-submarine warfare, anti-surface warfare, what we now call information warfare, which is intelligence collecting and electronic warfare. And it's also designed to operate and support special operations forces to deliver Navy SEALs clandestinely to locations that, quite frankly, we don't want to talk about right now. So that in a nutshell is the Iowa and what we do. I'll go back here if I can real quick to the crest. The crest of the submarine was designed by Captain James with the help of the Army Heraldry Command. And it's pays tribute to not only the battleship Iowa, but to the Sullivan brothers out of Waterloo. And it represents the state of Iowa. So with that, thank you very much. If you have any questions, I will try to answer them, or Christy will more than likely answer them.
I forgot to mention my mentor, Kelly Sullivan. So we have another sponsor in Iowa. Kelly Sullivan is a 4th grade teacher in Waterloo area, and she is the only family member, because all 5 Sullivan brothers died on one day. Her father, her grandfather, had a child. So she is the only remaining Sullivan, and since she was 18 years old, has been the sponsor of the Sullivans, which is a...
It's an Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyer, DDG-68.
So a good part of her life has spent, she's been very connected to that boat, and has seen many crew changes, but it's a very important part of her life, and she's been great to be helpful to me, and also has taken Caroline under her wing and is going to make sure that she navigates the system as well. So she was part of my notes and I forgot to mention her, so I wanted to make sure I did. And we spend a lot of time with kids, especially 8th graders, and I taught 8th graders for many, many years, but they have wonderful questions, so please have at it. One of the things they always ask about the food, and how long can this, you said 35 years it will last, but it can stay, they only have to come up for food. And so they line the floors of the boat, because it's pretty cramped, basically, with those big cans like you see in schools, or any institutions. So they have to walk on their food for a while. But eventually, after they eat it, they put plywood or put something over the top of it. They walk on it until they eat it in the corridors, and then eventually they can walk in the corridors. But it's just fascinating to get in there and see how efficient, and everybody has to learn everybody else's job, unlike on other kinds of vessels, because they can't come up. So you have to, if something happens to somebody, everybody has to be able to do everything. So anyway, my dad got his wings. Submariners get dolphins. It's the it's also a ceremony that all these crew members get. But please, ask questions.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Arlene.
Are there medical doctors aboard deal with illness or other injuries?
On a fast attack submarine, there is no doctor. There's what's called an independent duty corpsman. He or she is typically a first class or chief petty officer that receive an extensive amount of training. They also have the ability to do telehealth if it becomes necessary.
You can also imagine how, the families who are left behind, they can't email back and forth with their family members on the submarine. It's down too far. So when they come up, then they can get emails or talk to their families. But it's not only a lonely business for the people down under the water, but also for the family members who are back home, as many of you probably know if you were deployed yourself.
It can, a current example, my son-in-law is currently underway. He's the executive officer of a ballistic missile submarine. My daughter didn't hear from him for over 5 weeks because they go radio silent and you don't hear anything from them. And this was one of the longer times, but it could be up to 10, 12 weeks where the families don't have any communication with their families via email. And many, many years ago, there wasn't even email. Yes, sir.
What's the full staff number? How many people on board? And what did this thing cost? And how much longer is testing going to be?
The question is, how many crew members are on board? How much did it cost? And what was the third part?
You say it's still in testing now?
It is still in testing.
And how long will that go before it's operational?
There are roughly 130 to 135 members of the crew. The submarine, when it's fully finished, will cost about $2.6 billion. And the testing is finishing up right now. All the reactor plant testing has been done. They're starting to work on the combat systems testing. All that testing needs to be completed by the end of July or early August for the Navy to take it underway for sea trials to make sure it fits all the requirements and it is to contract specifications. Once the Navy agrees that the submarine is complete, it will be officially delivered where the contractor signs it over to the Navy. We expect that to be in late September, early October at this point.
And then the commissioning is the official ceremony where the Navy accepts the boat. My dad would call that a shakedown cruise. And that the USS Iowa had just come into Norfolk after it was just finishing its shakedown cruise. So it was seaworthy and ready to go.
Yes, sir.
Where will the base for this ship be located? And how's that determined?
The question is, where will the home port of the boat be? Right now, it'll be Groton, Connecticut for at least its first 5 years. There is a current, we're shifting a lot of assets to the Indo-Pacific, but right now, most of those assets that we're shifting are the older Los Angeles class submarines. We're saving most of the Virginia class are staying on the East Coast to counter the more sophisticated Russian threat.
And we do have several islands aboard. I don't know if we still do, but they were.
We now have three islands on board, at least for another month. We have one, a master chief who's been with the boat since day one. He was hoping, he specifically asked to come to Iowa so he could take it to sea. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to take it to sea as a Navy guy. He is being forced to retire as he's at max at that point, the end of June. But the good news is he is going to get his dream. He's going to go work for Electric Boat. He's going to take the boat to sea as a contractor. The other two are junior enlisted at this point, and I'm sure there'll be more coming as time goes along.
There are also Iowans who built the boat. So I met electricians and met various people as I was climbing around when they were building it, who grew up here.
So,
You hear challenges of recruitment for the armed forces. How is it for the Navy and getting these obviously very highly technical professionals to be on such a boat?
the question is how difficult it is to recruit and get folks to come into the submarine service. Right now, the projection is the Navy will fall roughly if I remember my numbers right, about 37,000 short of its goal this year. We're countering that by raising the enlistment age, offering some, if you will, preliminary training to increase test scores and increase physical fitness tests before we send folks to boot camp. We're increasing the incentive bonuses to retain people. The priority right now that we have for filling billets in the Navy are submarines and nuclear power for our 10, soon to be 11 nuclear powered aircraft carriers as well. Because my crew was 215. I could operate my ship with 190 if I had to. So submarines and nuclear power plants, very demanding, very specific, take a lot of manpower, and they get priority.
Could you speak to the power system a little bit? Because I'm not sure everybody understands what's involved there with the power, and what is the life of that power system on this particular ship?
The question is, what is the type of power plant, and how is the ship, how is that power distributed, and what's the lifeline of that power plant? The last question is easier. The first, this is an S9G reactor, which probably doesn't mean anything to you folks. It's designed to last 35 years. It is a nuclear powered submarine, which means that it is, nuclear power is used to generate steam, to turn steam turbines, to generate electricity, and then turn the propulsor. So.
And they could stay down for 35 years if they didn't have to come up for food?
Yes.
I think that's the interesting part of that. It's because of the nuclear power that allows them to stay. They could stay down there. They just haven't, people have to eat.
They have the ability to replenish their air supply on board, and they can also stick a mast up called a snorkel to let air in when they can, to get fresh air. Yes, ma'am.
How far below the surface do they typically go, and what's their maximum?
That depends on the mission and what they're doing. Typically, they're going to be down between 200 and 400 feet. If they're looking for other submarines, which is their primary goal. That is because the water salinity and temperature gives them the best opportunity to listen for other things.
And they can go under ice, so.
Yes,
This.
This ship is capable of going underneath the ice cap.
And one of the times we visited, they had a lot of screens up around it because the skin, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm practicing, the skin on this submarine is so sensitive that it can listen. And it was also like the state of the art. There was no other thing like it in the world, so they didn't want just people seeing what was going on there.
The submarine has got an anechoic coating which absorbs sound and prevents sound from going out. This particular class of submarine also has a tremendous number of, if you will, listening posts. Spots where there are sensitive receivers that pick up sound in the ocean, send them into the control center, into the central processing area, where fire control technicians and sonar technicians use computers to analyze that noise to determine what it is. They can pick up a surface ship at 60 miles away. They can pick up a submarine, depending on what that submarine is doing, up to 30 miles away. That's how sensitive these sensors are and the capability they have to understand the environment that they operate in.
But you don't want them dropping things,
No.
so everybody has to be really careful.
Yes, sir.
Fascinating presentation. Christy, as a sponsor, once the boat has been commissioned and seaworthy, will you have the opportunity to ride on it underwater?
They have told me that I will.
Cool.
Yeah.
What Christy hasn't mentioned is that for commissioning, she will give the order to man the ship.
And if my crew were here right now, and I said, "Fight Iowa," they would all say, as they did at the christening, "Beware the ghosts," all of them. So no matter where they are, if I say, or any of their commanders say, "Fight Iowa," they would say, "Beware the ghost." So it's, the young people, I think one of the amazing things about this too is that when we're speaking to high school students here in Iowa or any place, or middle school kids, there are young people on this boat who came right out of high school and they were sent to school, which is the equivalent of a community college degree. But they are right out of high school, so but there are also people who would have had a 4-year degree, and there are people with a PhD. This is a nuclear submarine, so there are people with degrees in nuclear physics. And it was interesting, I was down in Norwalk talking with a bunch of 8th graders one day, and there were 2 young men who were enlisted, and the young woman who was with us was their superior officer. But it was, she'd gone to Notre Dame and had a degree in physics, and they had come right out of high school. So you've got the whole 9 yards, and they're all working together from all over the country and all over the world. It's one of the things I learned as a child from my dad. His squadron came from 7 or 8 different states, and it was the first time he had ever been away from home and away from Iowa, and that's how he learned what people in the rest of this country and around the world were like, and basically told me that I had to get out of my country at some point so I could see what the rest of the world was like, and so the Rotarians made that possible for me at one point in my life. But watching all of these people working together regardless of their education is pretty amazing, and it's quite an opportunity in terms of recruiting for those young people who are just out of high school who may have thought they couldn't do college level work. Those young people with 2 years in that training that they get could go on and probably go on to get advanced degrees.
I've been associated with the Navy now since 1973, and I have not known anyone that has worked in the nuclear power field that did not succeed or excel either in the military or in the private sector. And I'm not aware of pretty much anybody that has the technical background in submarines that have failed either. They're given not only the technical skills and the education, but they're given the leadership and management skills to thrive outside the business world.
And when they first came for training, there was no boat, right, for 4 years or so. And so they came every day, and they were on computers. So they learned how to do everything that they're doing in this boat on the computer. And then there still wasn't a boat, so they were sent out to be a part of other submarines. So they were deployed, I guess, to submarines that were already working submarines, so that they could get the particular expertise that they needed in a particular field. And now they actually have a boat.
Yeah. Sir.
I understand that there are some amenities for the crew that need to be privately provided. Yeah, what would those be?
Those are some of the modifications I showed you in the wardroom and the crew's mess to make life a little more habitable. Some of the other things that we're working on is that in the berthing spaces, every bed, if you will, has a curtain across it. They've asked that the curtains be a little more sturdier fabric, and they have pockets put in them. The government pays for things, and they pay for things in the most cost-effective, cheap method possible. So we're in the process of getting those designed and made to make life a lot easier for the crew while they're at sea.
Sometimes it's books or movies, it's all kinds of things like that just makes, since they can't come up and they're far away from home, it just makes life a little better. So we have the opportunity.
The Navy's provided TVs for the wardroom and the chief's mess and the crew's mess. They didn't provide a sound system for them. So, we're in the process of, purchasing those to give them as well, so the crew doesn't have to do it.
One more question.
Sir.
Within the Navy, what's the significance between calling a craft a boat versus a ship? Or is there a craft?
Okay. Submarines have been traditionally called boats because they were initially very small. The definition of a boat in the Navy is anything under 50 feet. So that is historically carried on. Those first submarines that were in the Navy were about 50 to 60 feet, and that's why they called them boats. They also got the name because the health conditions weren't so great. They were called pig boats. The air got foul. The sailors, quite honestly, started not being able to bathe very well, and they stank. So You know, we're from Iowa, we know what a pig farm smells like. That's how they got the name Pig Boat, and that kind of stuck with me as well.
And they still do stink when they come out, right? The wives will tell me, what is that? It's a chemical reaction. There's something about, do you know what that is?
I don't know. You know, my wife always complained. I was an engineer. My wife always complained because I smelled like diesel fuel. My daughter smells diesel fuel, and she goes, "Oh, that's my daddy." So you know, I'm sure there is a distinct odor that comes off of them, but I can't tell you what it is.
Thank you so much. Oh boy, that was really informative and so interesting. And both Christy and Doug are willing to stay around and answer some questions if you have some more, because there's so much to know. It's just something to know that those men and women serving on the USS Iowa are really the tip of the spear for us. So we have a lot to be proud of, and we appreciate you sharing that with us. And in appreciation for your time today, we've donated a book in your honor to the Des Moines Public Library, and your book especially will love this. Every week we do this for our speakers. It will become part of the Rotary Rosie Reader Van collection, and that's a van that the Rotary Club's Foundation, our club's foundation, contributed $40,000 back in 2020 to the Des Moines Public Library for this van. So, do you appreciate that with your reading?
Absolutely.
Okay, so upcoming meetings coming up. Remember, you're always invited to bring guests to our meetings, thinking about someone who might enjoy a speaker or would make a good addition to our club. You just need to respond and let Kitty know by 9 a.m. on the Wednesday before the meeting. So really want you to think about these upcoming speakers. Next week, on May 30th, we're gonna have a couple of guests from the Rotary Club of Ames, who we've partnered with on their water and sanitation projects in Tanzania, in the Same area. It's gonna be very interesting. People are always amazed at everything that that project continues to do to benefit the people in Same. June 6th, Myrna Johnson with the Des Moines, or with Iowa Public Radio will be here. And on June 13th, Tiffany Toshek, the President and CEO of the Greater Des Moines Partnership. So we've got, as usual, a wonderful lineup from our program committee. Thank you so much for that, Susan. And I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. You are the thing that makes our Rotary Club of Des Moines tick. We really mean business here, and we are grateful for you to be Rotarians. Want to be sure everyone has a happy and safe Memorial Weekend, and take a moment or two to reflect on those military service members, veterans, and their families as we think of them over the Memorial Weekend. And until we meet again, I'd say let's get out there and have some fun and do good in the name of Rotary. We are adjourned.